Hello, my name is Melinda Matthews Clarkson, and I am your host today in Tech for Good Summit with Scottish Tech Army. We have three professionals with us today that we are going to talk about federated organizations and about how you can bring technology to the base of them. Now, when I was first given this task, I had to go look up what federated organizations were. And of course, we know them under many different names, such as an umbrella or a holding company. But federated organizations, according to Wikipedia, is a group of entities that are under the same united mission, but yet independent. And with that comes flexibility and some challenges. So let's get into that today with our panel. So we have George is with us today from Citizens Advice Scotland. Emma is with us today from Every Youth. And Dave is with us today from Trestle Trust. And since Dave, I can't through the name of your organization peer in and guess, why don't you start today by telling us just a short brief who you are and what your trust does.
Absolutely, Melinda. Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm Dave. The Trussell Trust, we are the umbrella organisation that helps coordinate many food banks up and down the country. So about 2/3 of the food banks that you see in your local community around the UK belong to the network of food banks that we coordinate at the Trussell Trust. My role within the organisation, so I am the head of strategic intelligence, which really translates into data, understanding data, analyzing data, and then using data in order to produce perhaps a story or a message, or to understand what's happening on the ground and how we can improve what we're doing. And so that Melinda is kind of my role within that, and it's great to be here today.
Sounds really exciting, and I already have like 5 questions for you, but we'll hold off a sec. Emma, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me on today. So my name's Emma Kens. I'm head of operations at Every Youth. So Every Youth until about 2 weeks ago was End Youth Homelessness, but we have now rebranded, and we are now an entirely new independent organisation. We are a national network of youth homelessness charities, and our partners work with young people everywhere from Aberdeen down to Devon. Every Youth in and of itself essentially works as a platform for collaboration and bringing youth homelessness charities together through the shared mission to end youth homelessness. So my role specifically is to manage and oversee our programs, which deliver housing and eat support to young people, and also supports young people with their mental health. A new area of growth for our organisation is strategic projects, which is where the digital comes in. So we don't have huge amounts of experience in the digital space, but it's a really exciting growth area for us. So yeah, that's a new area for me.
Great. I'm overwhelmed with how much you must deal with. Amazing. George, tell us a little bit about what you do.
I'm George. I'm Director of Advice Services at Citizens Advice Scotland. We're the membership organisation for 59 independent advocacy and advice bureaus who are members of the Scottish Association of Citizens Advice Bureaus. We're very much a national support organisation, everything from IT, HR, all the way through to digital standards, audit, and network services, alongside our sort of advocacy and other corporate functions. So that's our role, I guess. Why I'm here today is probably one of the things that the pandemic really forced upon us that we were already doing, but really accelerated, was the digital augmentation of our what was historically face-to-face in community services, and how we could deliver that, and what we found incredibly useful in terms of not seeking to shift channels at all, but trying to augment the options and choices that we give to citizens about how they may want to access the advice on a number of key topics.
Okay, so I'll go a little off script here because I have a question in general. All three of you deal with multiple, like George, you said 59 entities, yes? Emma, you said from Aberdeen to Cornwall?
Yeah, down to Devon, yes, and everywhere in between. Smaller number of organisations, but still, yeah, a lot of young people along the way as well.
And Dave, how many food banks are there across the nation?
So there are 420 charity organisations, and they go from right at the top of Scotland all the way down to the south coast, and then into Northern Ireland as well as Wales, of course. But within that 420, there's then 1,600 outlets, if you like, where people can get support.
All right, so Dave, I'm going to start with you because that's the biggest number. How do you communicate? How do you manage this disparate management system to get what you need to get out there and working together?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a challenge, but part of being part of the Trussell Trust network means that you buy into certain things, if you like, that you must do as a food bank within the network. So as well as helping to run or helping govern, run and support the network, Trussell Trust does an awful lot of work, if you like, outwards to do advocacy and campaign for change and all of those sorts of things. And in order to do that, we need a lot of the data and the information that the food banks themselves are gathering on the ground. So because we're such a large organisation, when you include all the food banks, we have information at a local geographical level about food poverty and food bank use that is unrivaled. Even the government doesn't have that level of granularity across the country. And so collecting that data becomes really super important for us to then turn into a conversation that we might have with a politician or a local councillor about how they can support people. So how do we do that? We have a large data collection system, which is in essence a database, where each food bank feeds in and sees their own little portal, a little bit, and then we see the kind of overall picture, and then my team and other teams within Trussell either look at the data from my perspective or help maintain that. And that's a really core part of being part of the Trussell Trust network. So everybody who gets a food parcel has been referred to a food bank by a referral agency. So that could be a social worker, could be Citizens Advice, could be your GP, whoever it is in a professional capacity is looking after you as an individual and has recognised that you need that kind of support in terms of food. And so there's certain bits of information that get noted down in that referral process that get entered into that system that we can then translate into the national picture. But of course, what we also offer to the food banks is it's not just it comes into us and then you kind of say goodbye to your data and that's it. There is that feedback loop that then says, okay, we're now going to provide back to you a summation of how your data looks and feels for you in your local area and how that compares to the bigger picture. So you're able to do something locally with that data as well as the national piece.
Dave, I'd have to say those individuals that are working in 400 plus food banks must be quite digitally savvy. Or did you create a portal that is not needed to be digital savvy so that people could put in that data for you?
Yeah, that's right. So most of our food banks are managed by individuals who are volunteers. Most of the data entry is done by volunteers, and just by the very nature of who those volunteers are, if you want somebody who's there week in, week out, they tend to be of an older generation. Most often they tend to be female, and quite often they have not been through a professional life like using the kind of technology that professionals in their 20s and so on are using today. And so just naturally that means the people are not as tech savvy as perhaps you might want them to be, need them to be, or whatever. And so yes, absolutely, the system has to be designed for the people who are there to input. There's an awful lot of training that goes in, and we have a helpline that helps support those questions of, I don't know how to reset my password, through to how on earth can I get this bit of information out. And then we offer volunteering roles, for example, around data, so trying to get people to come alongside their local food bank if they have that data professional skill set, to then help and support food banks to understand their data in their local context. So it's kind of providing both an avenue in that's simple and straightforward for the the volunteers in the first place, but then also thinking broader about how do we bring in those digital skills alongside the food banks.
Okay, super, Dave. But it sounds like you had done some really good work up front to have a platform to get that out. Now, George, I think in some of our pre-conversations, you talk about R&D and about how to get some of that digital technology out to your 59 entities, and that it can find some challenges in that. Would you like to share?
I think there's challenges from it's mostly not around uptake. I think we've got a very engaged and willing to try something new approach from, we're a volunteer-led network as well. How we've tried to progress, not digital transformation, I think we're very keen to say it's digital augmentation, is actually through co-design. So actually getting our bureau members to participate in how they will want the problem solved that we need a digital solution for. And that's one of the reasons why we found so much success with the Scottish Government's CivTech programme, is because of that search for a solution, but not in a very defined, almost procurement of a product. It's a discussion with members to say, what are the problems? And one of the problems during the pandemic was just simply not having enough people to be able to staff a helpline in the normal contact centre way. So we worked with CivTech to actually use some voice recognition AI to be able to direct those calls to the most local bureau so that people are consistently getting their most local advice. And even through that, those kind of conversations then generated other challenges that we had, because there was a large discussion about, as Dave said, we've got a client record management system. You need to enter things into that. There's quite a lot of notes that need to be done. I would think it would be fair to say that it was definitely top of the pet hates of volunteers when we spoke to them. But actually out of that conversation then came another challenge to see whether you could train a very large language model to take notes for people with their consent in an interview setting. So actually, rather than telling our members what was good for them, in terms of engaging with them and saying, right, we've got this problem, how do we think we could solve it? We've come up and managed to do some things that are really quite innovative for a voluntary sector charity to be, how should we say, researching and trying to develop, because we think it actually be beneficial for the rest of the public sector. But all of that's been founded around, we have a policy as a network that we will co-design any national project or project of significance with people. And it's quite a clear structure as to what rules we'll set, how we'll engage them around, if we've got a budget, how it would be spent, what do they want to do first. I think that's a lesson that we've learned, of whether it's digital or not, actually engaging with people and that innovation, and it opens people up to doing things differently if they feel that they've got the opportunity to influence that.
That's fantastic, because we go back to that definition when we started this, that umbrella aspect. It's always thought that it's a push down, it goes down. And what you're talking about, it was a bottom up solution that would fit the individuals that were going to use it. That's absolutely fantastic. Fantastic. So Emma, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that came along from COVID, and maybe now how you're taking those on to add digital solutions to it?
Yeah, so I think COVID obviously presented a lot of interesting challenges for everybody. Many of our partner charities faced huge challenges with, obviously, a lot of services having to go online, young people having to engage with services via digital platforms. Many young people that were perhaps either living in supported accommodation or living perhaps having moved on independently, not necessarily having access to digital platforms. That's a real barrier as well. I mean, a lot of young people may have a phone, but they might not have a laptop or access to Wi-Fi, all those kind of things. So I think COVID really, really highlighted some really big challenges in terms of digital and in terms of communicating with young people. Our partner charities, though, to be honest, they really they got up to speed pretty quickly and came up with some really, really interesting and innovative solutions for young people. And actually, many of them have found that young people, although the initial transition, I think, was quite challenging, a lot of young people, who may not have necessarily engaged that well before, have actually found like engaging digitally a lot easier. Some young people really want that face-to-face. Other young people actually engage much better via digital means. So that was really, really interesting. The way that we work with so obviously all of our members deliver their frontline delivery, and they deliver their essentially local authority contracts to provide support accommodation to young people. So the work that they do through that, they all kind of deliver as independent organizations. And what we do is we really look at providing kind of added value programs. So, our employability program focuses on getting young people into work. So we provide them with funding for that. Our housing fund supports young people into independent accommodation. So we support them with that through funding. And I think what we're now looking at doing is identifying other added value opportunities within that. So we're not changing the ways that these organizations deliver their basic services, but we're looking at opportunities to create other added value services. Specifically, not just to the organizations that we work with, but to the young people that they support. I think digital could be really key in terms of developing really exciting opportunities for young people. So a lot of the stuff that we're looking at the moment is looking at potentially leveraging, bigger support from companies. Can we make opportunities to get gift in kind and product to young people? Can we make that transition easier? I think there's a lot of really exciting opportunities that we're looking to explore. And I definitely think co-design, I think as George mentioned, is a really key factor in that. There's no point in us coming up with some like nifty little solutions if, say, young people aren't going to use them. So that I think is a really exciting area, and we're getting some support at the moment in doing some user research, because it's we're really early days, but we really want to make sure that we create digital solutions that are engaging and young people really want to access. So that's kind of where we're at. We're very much learning. But I think there's like huge potential.
So digital solutions, everybody talks about them. We all have, 155 apps on our phones, or our laptops and such, but it isn't always easy to build one. So Emma, where would you get the resources to build your digital solutions?
That's the key question all the time. And as every youth, we're a really tiny little team. So we don't have a big digital team. We don't really have like anybody that's going to build it for us. So to date, in terms of looking at the projects that we're looking at the moment, we've had some really great pro bono support from Deloitte, who've been doing some really interesting stuff around like digital upskilling. But then, when it comes to the crunch time, really, it's going to be any solution that has to be built will either be, we'll be looking at pro bono support or looking at specific funding for that, just because we're not really in a position to be able to develop any of that ourselves. So I think that's the main barrier in the third sector, is just the cost of any of those solutions, unless you're huge organizations and have have in-house teams or really large reserves. It can be really challenging, but it is really interesting that there are a lot of companies and other organizations out there, like the Scottish Tech Army, who are really willing to look at helping organizations to do that, and are really excited, I think, about the prospect as well. So so I think it's kind of a beg, borrow and steal situation, but hopefully beg, borrow and steal in a way that everybody gets very excited and wants to come on board for the journey as well. So
Dave, what about you? If you wanted to roll out something new in your system or add new applications, how would you go about that?
So I think the challenge for us, so we're in a slightly more fortunate position in that we're a bigger organization, certainly Emma, than you guys. So the kind of immediate capital outlay, whilst we have to budget it in and so on and so forth, we can manage that. Where we struggle massively is then the how you lay that down through the food banks.
The implementation.
And implement it, absolutely. Because there's so many, you're talking to so many different people, all potentially at the same time, split across the UK with all different priorities and all of that side of things to deal with. That it becomes really challenging, really difficult. And we certainly do not have a team big enough and skilled enough to do that. And so that for us is where we're kind of into the likes of the Scottish Tech Army, for example, helping us, which has been magnificent over the past couple of years of laying out and implementing a new volunteer management system that we have kind of brought in for the food banks to help support them. But one of the other things is within a federated approach is recognizing the differences of the different organizations that you're dealing with. And so you can have a vanilla solution in this, this example of the volunteer management system. That's great. But actually for this food bank over here, they want something implemented in a different way than this food bank over here. The system is capable of doing that. But of course, if you're trying to administer it centrally, that becomes quite tricky to be able to do. And so having the technical nous and the ability to understand the nuances, as well as the operational understanding of what's required, and being able to translate, if you like, tech gobbledygook into something that the food bank folks can understand, who are operational, know what they do brilliantly, but don't necessarily see how you could tweak what the volunteer management system could do, or whatever it is. That's where the challenge comes in, and that's where being able to pull on the likes of volunteers through the Tech Army or corporate partners or whatever to sit alongside the food banks and work that through with them is a real benefit. And without that, you wouldn't be able to roll it out, because you'd hit these barriers all the time of, it doesn't quite do what I want it to do, therefore I'm not going to engage, and I'm just going to pull away and stay where I am, thank you very much. I'm not seeing the benefit of it. So that's one of the key things for us, rather than necessarily that initial capital outlay, but that's kind of the position we're in.
Okay, hey George, how about you? Where do you see the challenge? Obviously, you've worked with CivTech. I think you were CivTech 6 you mentioned, and I think CivTech is now at 8. It's cohort at number 8. They're a great organization to ask the question out there and to help build it. But what do you find the challenges in your business of this federated model with digital?
I guess the issue is we've been incredibly grateful to Scottish Government and CivTech. They've funded us for 4 challenges, 6, 7 and 8, 2 in 7. And we're hopeful we've delivered some really great R&D and commercial products out to the market. The difficulty is we haven't necessarily had any funding or any funding streams there for charities, not just ourselves, but others across Scotland, to be able to mainstream the solutions that we've got. So from our perspective, in terms of, we'd worked with a digital agency that specialises in no-code to try and keep the costs as low as possible for any future rollout. Even that has meant that we haven't been able to roll out maybe the level of AI-driven sort of conversational assistants or chatbots that we would actually have liked to have on CivTech program. And what we could see, it was roughly 5 to 10% of inquiries could have been self-served with some form of digital assistance. And when you're a volunteer-led organisation who has massive amounts of latent demand, we know we get to potentially up to 150, 200,000 unique clients a year, but we know that isn't the full extent of demand for advice and advocacy across Scotland. Even being able to, one, help the client quicker out of normal office hours as well. So if you're awake at night worrying about debt, it's affecting your mental health, being able to self-serve or at least book an appointment via the website or a seamless sort of journey or a conversation with a bot doesn't replace that kind of empathetic face-to-face advice, but from that choice and marginal gains perspective is really helpful. But the issue there is we will return social value, which in the Scottish context for a wellbeing economy, I think is an appropriate return. But we need to look at different business models, therefore, as to how digital is funded within the charity sector, because I think we're going to have, from the latter three of our projects, real exportable products that will go on to deliver commercial gain for Scotland. But other than a license in perpetuity and no funding to be able to scale that throughout our network, that's not really the benefit that we'd hope for. And that's no criticism of CivTech, because they're there as an accelerator and an incubator period. It's a discussion that we probably need to have about how we invest for social returns in digital, and especially within the voluntary sector.
George, in my past job as the CEO of Code Clan, I sat in front of the Scottish National Investment Bank and very straight asked, where are they on value to the community, the country, the nation versus commercial value, right? So for every person that Emma's organization gets to house and helps them with their mental health, all of that, it has such a huge impact on the country, the councils, all of that. It has a worth, but because it's not measurable in dollars or in bits, bytes, and usage, it doesn't get the same attention and focus from investors. And one of my personal, we've got to fix this somehow, that there's an algorithm. Maybe we can just ask, a few of the AI systems out there to write the good chat so we can send it up to investors and, governments to say, this is how you can measure that value so that we can move on in this space.
I think the issue there, I'm going to just come back on that, is we've had discussions with the Scottish National Investment Bank, and they've said they don't see their mission isn't to invest in social value, which, personal perspective, is quite disappointing. But it is measurable. We've known for years what is preventable and what could be early intervention upstream in service design. So I think the example I'm always pulled back to is from a lady in Scotland called Karen McCluskey, who says that if you can divert from the justice system, a young woman, girl, was the example, you can save the state £250,000. Same within any of our food bank, youth work, advice. Yeah. We know what the failure demand and what the additional costs are on the state. And from a social return on investment value sort of perspective, if you invested in prevention and early intervention within the charity sector, then that will bring you social returns. And it would be great if there was a business model or an investment bank that can actually look at those social returns, because it's not just charity. We save public services money that they have to expend through their budget, and that part of that investment in the future world should be around digital, AI, other things that can bring forward more positive outcomes and ultimately save the state money.
And parents and grief. I mean, there's so much there. So George, I would continue to work with you on figuring out how we can come up with that algorithm and get it into the government. So we're getting to the end of our time here. I'd have to just say a few call outs here. For Scottish Tech Army has done some amazing things, and it sounds like they've worked with you, Dave, and a great example of how working together with volunteers come up with a good cause, and now it's positively affecting many people, not just a corporation, not just this, but hundreds of thousands are probably people in your organization, right? Emma, I assume you're going to raise your hand real quick and make sure that the Scottish Tech Army is working on your projects.
Yeah. No, we have already had really, really great discussions with them, and they were super interested in some of our projects. And we're just really grateful to have organizations that are interested and excited, especially for little organizations. Having people that are digital savvy and can translate my idea into something is really exciting.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask each one of you to close this with, if you were to give any advice to others that are in your same type of position in other types of charities or umbrella organizations or federated organizations, what wisdom would you give them about leveraging digital in the businesses? Well, I guess into the organizations. Dave, how about you?
So I think my advice would be twofold, Melinda. So one would be to pick up the kind of investment piece. Don't be afraid to talk to the tech people, even if you are not techie yourself, and use the kind of the corporate social responsibility type stuff that many of these organizations have, to have that conversation around what the art of the possible is. And then in order to get it into the federated approach, I think, communication, George has mentioned it, Emma's mentioned it, I've mentioned it, that communication with the federation. So the volunteer management system, yes, it's consensually, but it's been born out of a conversation that we've had with many of our food banks over time. And so using that to then spawn stuff is super important. Otherwise, you will never be successful in delivering change through the federated kind of network that you're part of.
Fantastic. George, how about you?
I'd say twofold. One, to quote sort of Jeff Beck, great things happen when you're open to trying things differently. And it's really a mindset thing there from digital. Secondly, I think we've really benefited from having a couple of trustees on our board who are in the tech industry themselves, but haven't delved into operational advice, but have been there as a sounding board for us, and they're volunteers. So I think that's a plea maybe to Scottish Tech Army, not in terms of doing tech, but if you've got the ability to volunteer on a board such as the CAB or another charity, almost having that sounding board there for officers to bounce off, incredibly important as well.
That's a great idea. We could do something with that, George. Okay, and Emma, how about you?
I suppose because I'm talking about it from like a completely different scale where we're just at the beginning of our journey, I think for any smaller organizations that want to look at doing this is probably to, I guess, be a bit brave and just go out there and see what there is. There's loads of organizations that are really open to providing pro bono advice, potentially creating things for you, providing funding. So I think if you've got an idea and you want to see if it can work, you just need to get out there and start having those conversations, and then bring everybody along for the journey with you.
Be brave, be bold.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's been a great talk. I think we could probably gone into many more details about how technology can assist in a better human environment that we all live and work in. I thank you for your time, and thank you to the Scottish Tech Army for being as amazing as they are and doing tech for good. Thank you, everybody.